Singing for peace in a country divided by war, this Sri Lankan drama group tries to share the horrors that they've experienced.
I didn't know if he was captured or killed.
War devastates the lives of thousands of women around the world, leaving them widowed, displaced, detained, separated from husbands, children and other loved ones, victims of injury and violence. In some countries, women take up weapons to protect themselves and their families. More usually, they are civilians, trying to survive as their families and communities are being swept away.
To have the cemetery, to be able to go and put a flower on his grave.
My husband was a very kind man. He did everything he could possibly do for me and for our family. I was 7 months pregnant.
I am even afraid of going out alone. I just don't know what will happen. We have lost everything and we were forced to suffer without any reason. My son was left behind at school in the north when we had to leave him behind. I have not seen him for the last 7 years.
Cedric went missing in January 96. Till this war ends and till there's a solution, I don't think I can give up.
In most wars, as here in Sri Lanka, women are the often innocent civilians caught in the crossfire.
There's death, there's injury, there's loss of loved ones, there is rape. Rape goes hand in hand with conflict, we know that. Less obvious is the fact that in a conflict area there is presence of armed personnel, usually armed men, whichever side. And this has a bearing on the type of violence that is propagated on women. Conflict breaks up communities and families, and this lack of family support, community support, really hurts children and women.
Sri Lanka, holiday paradise in the Indian Ocean, with a population of 18 million from a variety of ethnic groups. But away from the tourist beaches to the north and the east of the country, Sri Lanka is being torn apart by a bloody civil war between the Tamil Tigers and the Sri Lankan government forces. It's gone on now for 17 years. Our film was made here, but it could have been made in any number of war-torn countries where conflicts destroy women's lives. A bomb in the heart of Colombo.
It is a way of life for us. I mean, the bomb bursting in the top of my lane, I wouldn't even go to see what happened. It's just a huge noise I hear in the middle of the night. I just cover up my ears and go to sleep. So it has become now a way of life for us. And that's what's sad about it. People are beginning to take it as a part of their lives.
Shanti Arulampalam runs Survivors Associated, which gives psychological counselling to women and children. Around the world, counselling is now recognised as a way to overcome the traumas of war.
What we try to do in this is to explain to these women the psychological impact of grief and bereavement on their mental processes and how they can actually empower themselves to get over the grief and get on with their lives.
Worst hit by the war are the people in the north and the east of the country and the villages bordering those provinces. Bomb attacks have been targeting the capital city, Colombo. But it's here in the villages that people suffer the most.
You live in a rural community. It's very pleasant generally, even if you're poor. You've got a fair amount of food on your table. You have a nice environment. And for the women, they've got their extended family to talk with. If they have a problem, they've got a group of friends. But the moment war goes into the community, that entire structure is destroyed.
This was all that was left of Kamalawati's home when she returned to the village a couple of months after the attack.
Kitchen is there, this side, and here is veranda and other rooms. She is very sad because her husband also died.
The moment conflict comes in and her husband is no longer there, she's left totally alone. And so loneliness, fear, hunger, not really knowing where to turn for emotional support, for economic support, that makes her go into herself and generally ends up in depression or a lot of times in suicide. Because of the culture and the traditions that we have in our country, if you have lost your husband, you are more or less looked down upon, and people think that you're a very unlucky woman. A lot of people are scared to get involved with you because they think, okay, your husband was killed because he belonged to one or other of the groups, and if they get involved, their husband would also get killed because you get tarred with the same brush.
Every day in Sri Lanka, more women become widowed because of the fighting. Worldwide, women widowed by conflict have to take on roles they are ill prepared for, often becoming the only breadwinners to support and care for their families. Some women take up arms. A Noja is a home guard, a post she's held for several years. All round the world, women are choosing or being forced to play more active roles in the military.
I decided to join the forces as I thought that it would be really good if I do this for my village. There was also no work for me at home, and so I thought it would be a good thing to do.
Anoja's father was out farming in the fields when he lost his foot after treading on a landmine.
First, I was against her joining the Home Guard, but then I thought about it again after she was trained. Our people are being killed here, and it's important that she is able to protect our community.
War stretches existing health services to the limit. Treating casualties means less resources to go into everyday health care. This adds to women's suffering, as they need health care not just when they're ill. They need antenatal and maternity care and clinics for their children. For the last few years, Dr. Bandara has been risking his life to counsel women and deliver basic reproductive health services to the border villages and camps. We could not film them, but along this stretch of the road there were bunkers every 50 meters. In wars throughout the world, military checkpoints restrict the movement of civilians. For women, these may increase anxiety about making any journey and involve the risk of humiliating ID checks and body searches. En route, there was ample evidence of previous offences and the impact on civilian lives. With a potential ambush around every corner, each trip that Dr. Bandara takes along this road has its risk.
This area is the conflict area. Most of the troops are coming and just killing the innocent people. because of that they are in a frightened state. We have to organize mobile facilities to these places, and we have to provide treatment and other resources to them. We have to come to their doorstep.
Most of the people left in the villages are women. The men are either ill, dead, missing, or away fighting in the war. Poor access to health services, lack of security, and an increasing number of rapes has led to a sharp rise in maternal mortality and unwanted pregnancies.
Even though they come to this place, they are a little bit shy. They have heard that some of the rebel groups are hanging around in the jungle. Most of these people, they are in a difficult situation. Many of them are widows, so they are alone. They are insecurity. So in the night, there will be some threatening of sexual harassment if the husband is not there. Pregnant Amala.
These photographs show the aftermath of a recent attack. This woman was killed, her unborn child torn from her womb. Men, women and children were massacred. The remaining villagers were forced to flee for their lives. Samanthi was the only one of her family to survive an attack on her village. She still finds it impossible to talk about what happened. Her family was slaughtered in front of her. She was shot in the stomach and lay unconscious under their bodies until she was found. Reluctant to abandon their homes, villages and livelihoods, it's often women who are the last to leave. They move from place to place and end up in makeshift camps like this. Today, Dr. Bandara is visiting to counsel the most recently displaced people. This camp was set up only 3 months ago. The people finally fled their village, 20 kilometers away, after they'd suffered over a dozen attacks. They've lost their loved ones, their homes, their land and their livelihoods. With no way to earn a living, all they can do is wait for the war to end.
This environment is a very difficult environment to live in harmony. Life is monotonous, so they are not really satisfied with their day-to-day activities. They have changed their environment. They can't get work. They have lost their infrastructure. So they have to adapt. That is one aspect of psychological problem.
Women, as carers, have to shoulder other burdens. Some used to be a primary school teacher. Now she has to look after her husband and her children.
This is a picture of the inside of my house. You can see that we used to live well with all this furniture, TV, videos. We left it all behind and now we are living here.
Some of them, they are having psychosomatic symptoms, headache, chest pain. They can't sleep well, they can't concentrate. They might go to depression and some schizophrenic disorders. Women, they don't have a proper security, and sometimes they might face to some sexual problems, sexual assault.
If my husband is away, I will never stay here on my own. It is not safe here. I'll stay with a neighbor.
Personally, I think about 10 to 20% of the young girls have undergone sexual abuse due to this war.
There is no fear of tomorrow because they don't know if tomorrow will come. So under those circumstances, the same rules that apply to you and me, they just don't apply. This is another reason for increased incest. We have many reports of incest. We have mothers who are missing, then fathers forcing their daughters to have sex with them. In certain villages bordering conflict, young girls have admitted that armed men come in at night. These girls are used as sex workers. They're not allowed to protest. They're not allowed to lock their door. And the whole community tolerates this because these armed men protect the community. So it's a trade-off. These are the very subtle things. Nobody would even think of reporting it.
In war, the number of unwanted pregnancies soar. Some pregnancies may be a result of rape. Survivors of rape may be forced to give birth, often with tragic implications for themselves, the children they have, and their communities. New Year in Sri Lanka. A time for reflection, a time to move forward. But for many women around the world, the passing of time is no cause for celebration.
Jason died on September 95 and Cedric went missing in January 96. So it's 4 years.
There are hundreds of soldiers missing in action in Sri Lanka and thousands more worldwide.
I know the pain. I've suffered both. I've suffered my son dying. That is, you can accept and you can get on and you can go back to your memories, but not knowing is something very, very difficult. You get various stories. I mean, some people say they've seen him in chains, but I don't know how far it's true. I like to prefer just not to think about that side of the whole thing. I mean, I get on with life and people say, oh, you're strong. But it's there all the time. I've got 2 sons, so I've got to be strong for them. Till this war ends and till there's a solution, I don't think I can give up.
In contrast to displaced camps, the inhabitants of this village have been resettled in a safe area for the last 2 years. Houses have been built and a sense of community restored. Today, the village is preparing for traditional New Year celebrations, traditions that have taken place for centuries. The villagers are praying for a peaceful and prosperous future. In another resettled village to the northwest, Wikrama and Patricia Doti have an inter-ethnic marriage. She's Tamil, he's Sinhalese. The family was forced to flee their home in the north 7 years ago. They left at night and were separated en route. Now they've been reunited, everyone, that is, except for their eldest son.
Where we used to live, it was better. When we came here, life became very difficult. Things are looking up a bit now. My eldest son was studying. He was a bright boy and the school near us was not that good. We wanted him to have a good education. And when we were finally forced to leave, my brother took my son to Jaffna and put him in school there for his education. And that was about 7 years ago. We have not seen him since. If I could, I would go and find him, but there is no one here to look after my children.
There are many families like ours where Sinhala and Tamils lived in harmony. They've been destroyed by people who don't know the value of family love.
Conflict affects all of us negatively, but there are a lot of positive reactions as well. Women are rebuilding their lives, they are going on, not just coping, but actually in some cases doing even better. It has broadened their horizons in that they are taking on things and doing things which they couldn't do before. Children and women are not just victims, they're agents for change. They want a country in peace. They can think of positive things to do to promote that peace. They want to respond to violence with non-violence.
In a lodge in Colombo, 55-year-old Saraswathi is enjoying her first few days of freedom after finally being released from 4 years' detention. Around the world, the International Committee of the Red Cross visits almost 7,000 women and girls detained for reasons related to armed conflict. For some women, detention can mean separation from their children, isolation from family support, and ill treatment. The social, psychological trauma and health problems felt by Saraswathi and other women like her are all too familiar to Shanti Arulampalam.
I can tell you very personal stories about detention because I was detained without any questions asked, without any recourse to legal processes. That had a very great impact on me because I realized that something had to be done for us women of all ethnic groups who were going through this kind of trauma. And we basically didn't have the strength or the knowledge on how to get over that. This is a picture of a program we did, an empowerment program for widows. The target group is mostly widows and their families, but we actually use young people from the community with secondary education to help us mobilize communities.
Pramalata is 24. Several of her relatives have been killed in the war. Now she helps to bring together women from across the region who've begun to set up support groups. They use drama as a tool for rehabilitation.
Some of the women here are widows of men killed in the war. They have a very difficult life. They work in the fields and some of them have 2 or 3 children to bring up on their own. In the experience of these women, they might, for example, face sexual harassment from officials when they try to get compensation for their husbands who are killed in the war. If they don't give in to the demands of the officials, the women might be frustrated in her efforts.
My son died in the war, and I know, like other mothers, the pain that we feel for our dead sons, the pain in the deepest of our hearts. My idea was to show through this drama what I feel, to share the pain in my heart with the people watching this play. When people saw me acting, they might have understood how I felt and felt the same way. I really just want to tell everyone that peace is the only way.
But peace isn't going to come easily in Sri Lanka, or many of the 30 or so armed conflicts taking place in the world today. And there are internationally agreed rules on the treatment of civilians in war, laid down in the Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols. If only these were better observed, the suffering of women in conflicts around the world.
In